Mr. President, and I use that term very loosely. I don't know what little power play you think you're pulling by summoning me here, but let me be crystal clear. I am not one of your scared little Republican congressmen who kiss your ring. I represent actual people, real Americans, not your billionaire friends and Mar-a-Lago cronies. Ilhan Omar stood in front of the resolute desk, arms crossed, her voice dripping with contempt. She'd refused the chair that had been offered. I'd wanting to stand, wanting to look down at him, wanting to show she wasn't intimidated. And frankly, she continued, her voice rising, an elderly man with 91 felony indictments, who can barely string a coherent sentence together, and who incited an insurrection against his own government, probably shouldn't be lecturing anyone about anything. So, if this meeting is about my statements on Palestine, about calling out Israel's apartheid regime, you can take your fake outrage and you're done. President Trump interrupted calmly from behind his desk. He didn't look angry, didn't even look annoyed. He just sat there with a slight smile, as if he were watching something mildly entertaining. It was January 28, 2025, just over a week into Trump's second term. The Oval Office, on a cold winter afternoon, had light streaming through the tall windows. This wasn't a normal congressional meeting. There were no staff taking notes. See, no photographers, just Trump behind the resolute desk, FBI Director Christopher Wray standing off to the side with thick folders, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem with her own files, and 2 Secret Service agents by the doors. Omar had been summoned by White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles that morning. The President requests your presence at 3 p.m. Urgent national security matter. No details, no explanation, just the summons. She thought she knew what this was about. She thought Trump was trying to intimidate her over her pro-Palestinian statements, over her criticism of Israel, over her tweets calling out U.S. foreign policy, so she'd come ready to fight. Alert the media, have cameras waiting outside, stand up to the bully president, show her supporters she was fearless. Now she stood in the Oval Office, thinking she had the upper hand, thinking her media profile protected her, thinking Trump was just another old man she could dominate with righteous anger, like she'd dominated every other confrontation in her political career. She had no idea what was about to happen. "No, I'm not done," she snapped at his interruption. "You want to talk about national security? You're the national security threat. You're a racist who banned Muslims from entering this country. You're a fascist who puts children in cages. You're everything wrong with America, wrapped up in a cheap suit and bad spray tan." She leaned forward on his desk, aggressive, confrontational. "You think you can silence me? I have millions of followers. I have CNN and MSNBC and every major progressive organization defending me. You're a weak old man playing tough guy because that's all you know how to do. Your own party barely tolerates you. Half your cabinet thinks you're losing your mind. And you want to threaten me?" Trump still didn't react the way she expected. He didn't get angry. He didn't yell back. He just sat there watching her with that same slight smile. "I'm not scared of you," Omar continued, her voice shaking with anger. "I've faced worse than you. I fled a civil war. I came to this country with nothing. I've been targeted by racists my whole life. You're just another bully who thinks his power makes him strong. But you're nothing. You're a pathetic old man. Who sit down." Trump's voice suddenly cut through her rant. Not loud, not angry, just cold. Absolute. The voice of someone who'd run billion-dollar companies and wasn't asking. Omar paused mid-sentence. Something in his tone made her hesitate. I said, "Sit down," Trump repeated, his voice still calm, but carrying an edge of steel underneath. "Because what I'm about to show you is going to change your entire life, and you're going to want to be sitting when you hear it." For the first time, Omar felt a flicker of uncertainty. This wasn't playing out like she'd expected. Trump should have been yelling back at her by now, should have been getting defensive, but he looked completely relaxed, almost amused. Slowly, she lowered herself into the chair facing his desk. Her confidence started to waver just slightly. Trump leaned forward, his expression changing. The slight smile disappeared. What replaced it was something colder, more serious. "You think you're here because of your Palestine statements," he said quietly. "You think I give a damn about your tweets? I don't care what you say about Israel. I don't care about your rallies. I don't care about your interviews with CNN. You're here because for the past 6 months, the FBI has been investigating you for terrorism financing and immigration fraud." He pushed a thick folder across the desk toward her. "And this morning, I declassified all of it. As a matter of fact, your brother-in-law in Mogadishu, Ahmed Noor, is an al-Shabaab financier. The Treasury designated his money transfer business as a terrorism financing entity. And the $78,000 you've been wiring to him over 3 years goes directly to terrorists." Omar's mouth went completely dry. "I don't know what your citizenship—" Trump pressed on, ignoring her attempted interruption. "It was obtained through fraud. You claimed your mother died in Somalia. But she's alive, living in London. We have passport records of you visiting her. You also claimed you came as a refugee fleeing violence. Yet you used a fake family name to qualify for refugee status. You committed immigration fraud to get here." He leaned back in his chair. "So, here's what's going to happen. You have 72 hours to resign from Congress and leave the United States voluntarily. You'll renounce your fraudulent citizenship. You'll get on a plane. You'll go back to Somalia, or wherever else will take you. Do that, and all of this stays quiet. You can spin your resignation however you want. Health reasons, family reasons, whatever story you want to tell." He paused. "Let that sink in. Or you refuse. And tomorrow morning I hold a press conference in the Rose Garden. I will declassify every single page of this investigation. That includes the terrorism financing, the immigration fraud, and the FBI watch list you've been on since 2018. I will sign an executive order initiating denaturalization proceedings on national security grounds. DHS will arrest you. You'll be detained while you fight it in court for the next 2 years. You'll lose because the evidence is overwhelming. Your citizenship will be stripped, and then they'll deport you to Somalia publicly, with every camera in the world watching." Trump's voice grew quieter. "For easy way or hard way? It's your choice. You've got 72 hours. Omar sat frozen. This couldn't be real. This had to be a bluff. It must be some kind of intimidation tactic. You can't do this. This is unconstitutional. You can't just strip a member of Congress." "Director Wray," Trump said, his eyes still fixed on Omar. "Show her what we have, so she understands this isn't a bluff." FBI Director Christopher Wray stepped forward, opening one of his folders. His expression remained completely neutral, purely professional. This was simply evidence to him. And as Ray began laying out 6 months of investigation, Omar realized with growing horror that this wasn't a bluff at all. This was real, and her entire life was about to be destroyed. To understand how we got here, how the woman who'd been summoned expecting to bully the president ended up facing deportation, you have to go back 4 hours earlier. That's when Omar was still confident this was just another performance opportunity. 4 hours earlier, Ilhan Omar sat in her congressional office, reviewing talking points with her communications team. The White House call had come at 10 that morning. It was from Chief of Staff Susie Wilds. The message was formal and brief. The President requests Representative Omar's presence at the Oval Office at 3 p.m. Seen today. It concerned an urgent national security matter. Please confirm attendance. There were no details beyond that. No indication of the subject matter either. Just the summons itself. Omar's communications director, a young progressive activist named Maya Hernandez, looked concerned. A national security matter is vague. It could be anything. Should we try to get more information before you go? Omar waved dismissively. See, it's obvious what this is about. I've been all over cable news calling out Israel's genocide in Gaza, calling for cutting military aid. Trump's donors are furious. This is him trying to intimidate me, trying to make me back down. Her chief of staff wasn't so sure. The phrasing is unusual, though. Usually, when they want to complain about policy statements, they just have a staffer call. The president personally requesting your presence is different. Because he thinks he can bully me in person, Omar said with confidence. He thinks if he gets me in the Oval Office, I'll be scared, that I'll moderate my positions. He has no idea who he's dealing with. She felt supremely confident. She'd become one of the most recognizable members of Congress, part of the squad with AOC, Rashida, and Ayanna Pressley, boasting nearly 4 million Twitter followers and constant appearances on MSNBC and CNN. She'd made a career out of being the bold progressive who stood up to power, who wasn't afraid of anyone. Trump had attacked her repeatedly during his first term, tweeting that she should go back to Somalia and calling her an anti-Semite. Conservative media had obsessed over her for years, and every single attack had only made her more famous, more powerful, and more beloved by her base. And she'd fundraised millions off Trump's attacks. This would be no different. It was Trump trying to intimidate her. She would stand strong, walk out, and do a media blitz about how she'd told him off. Her supporters would eat it up. More fundraising would follow, and more fame. This was her chance. Get our media contacts on the line, Omar instructed Maya. I want friendly reporters posted right outside the White House. After the meeting, I'll make a statement about whatever authoritarian nonsense he tries to pull. I bet CNN will want me on live. Maya was already nodding as she texted her contacts. But what if he actually has something serious? What if this is about something we have no idea about? Omar just laughed. Like what? I'm a member of Congress. I have constitutional protections. What's he really going to do? The absolute worst he can do is yell at me. And I'm very good at handling old men who yell. She spent the next hour getting ready. This wasn't defensive prep, it was aggressive prep. She had no intention of going to the Oval Office just to get a lecture. She was going there to make a statement, to prove to Trump and the entire world that she couldn't be intimidated. She ran lines through her head, mapped out how she would stand instead of sitting, planned how to cut him off if he started one of his usual rambling monologues, and figured out how she'd call out his racism and incompetence right to his face. It was going to be legendary. Her staff would be sure to leak all the details, Progressives everywhere would celebrate her for her courage. But what Omar didn't know, what she could have never possibly imagined, was that while she was busy preparing for her big performance, Trump had been in the Situation Room all morning, going over a 6-month-long FBI investigation. There was evidence she had no clue existed, like a case she never saw coming, and he had chosen this very day because he finally had everything he needed to end her career and deport her from the country she had fraudulently entered. At 8 o'clock that morning, hours before Omar was even summoned, President Trump was sitting in the White House Situation Room with a small, select group: FBI Director Christopher Wray, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, NSA Director General Sarah Mitchell, White House Counsel Todd Blanche, IA and Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. The secure conference table was literally covered in classified folders, financial records, and immigration files. It was 6 months of investigation, all compiled into a mountain of evidence that was about to destroy a sitting member of Congress. Trump, for his part, looked fresh and energized. He had been waiting a long time for this moment. "All right, walk me through it all. I want to know every single detail before she walks in here this afternoon." FBI Director Wray opened his first folder with the methodical precision of a man who had spent 30 years building cases. "We kicked off the investigation 6 months ago after Treasury flagged some unusual wire transfers from Representative Omar to Somalia. The amounts were structured: 3,000 here, so 5,000 there, always staying just under the $10,000 reporting limit. That's a classic red flag for either money laundering or financing terrorism." He then pulled out a stack of financial records. "We traced every single transfer. The person on the receiving end is an Ahmed Noor, who is based in Mogadishu. He happens to be Omar's brother-in-law, her first husband's brother. This Ahmed runs a Hawala money transfer network that goes by the name Tawakkal Express." "Hawala?" Trump asked. "It's an informal system for moving money, common in Somalia and across the Middle East and Africa." Wray explained, "It's all based on trust and family networks, making it incredibly hard to trace through normal banking channels, but we managed to get court orders, and we worked with our sources inside Somalia." The Treasury Department actually designated Tawakkal Express as a terrorism financing entity back in 2023. Ahmed Noor himself is on the FBI's terrorism watch list. He then laid out surveillance photos taken in Mogadishu. They showed a man in traditional Somali clothing standing outside a storefront with peeling paint. "This is our guy, Ahmed. And we have solid evidence, intercepts, informant reports, financial tracking, that shows he funnels money from Tawakkal directly to al-Shabaab operatives all across southern Somalia." Trump studied the photos, and Omar is sending him money. $78,000 over the last 3 years, Wray confirmed. It was done in 17 separate wire transfers, and every single one was structured to fly under the radar. "We've tracked at least $34,000 of that money straight to individuals who are on terrorism watch lists. It went into bank accounts that belong to known al-Shabaab commanders and their facilitators." He then laid out a flow chart that detailed how the money moved. Omar wires the money to Ahmed. Ahmed then moves it through his Tawakkal network. From there, it spreads out to a bunch of different people. Some of those people are, in fact, designated terrorists. So, it's not a direct payment. She could try to claim she had no idea what Ahmed was doing with the funds, but the pattern here is just undeniable. And let's be clear, she's more than smart enough to know exactly what her brother-in-law does. Next up was DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, who presented her section with a voice tight, with barely controlled anger. The terrorism financing is serious, but it's the immigration fraud that gives us the actual legal grounds for denaturalization. Her entire presence here in the United States is built on a foundation of lies. She then opened a set of immigration files that went back decades. Representative Omar's official story is that she came to the U.S. in 1992 as a refugee, fleeing the civil war in Somalia. It says her mother died in Somalia when she was just a little girl. It says her father brought her and her siblings here to escape all the violence. All of this is carefully used to build and maintain her image as this great refugee success story. The problem is, it's also almost completely false. Noam then pulled out another set of documents. Her mother never died in Somalia. Her name is Fadumo Aden. She's alive and has called London home since 1991. We've got British passport records to prove it. Entry and exit stamps clearly show Omar has visited her mother in London at least 8 times since 2015. However, Omar has publicly claimed her mother passed away when she was just a child. Trump leaned in closer. So, she's been lying about her supposedly dead mother being alive. And it gets even worse, Noam continued. The refugee application that brought her family to the U.S. in 1992 was filed under the Omar family name. But birth records we've gotten from Somalia indicate she was actually born Ilhan Noor, with the last name of Ahmed, the Al-Shabaab financier. We think she used a different family name, Omar, instead of Noor, to qualify for refugee status under family reunification rules. Noam then presented the documents. If she truly was Ilhan Noor, she wouldn't have qualified for the Omar family's application. So, she took on a different identity. That's a clear case of immigration fraud. This fraud enabled her to enter the country and eventually become a citizen. Can we really prove that? White House counsel Todd Blanche asked, "Birth records from Somalia, especially during a civil war, aren't exactly bulletproof." "We've got multiple sources," Noam stated confidently. "There's a birth certificate filed in 1982, listing her as Ilhan Noor, on school records from a Kenyan refugee camp using that same name, and testimony from people who knew the family. And here's what truly seals it: her marriage records." Noam pulled out even more documents. Omar married Ahmed Hersi in an Islamic ceremony back in 2002. They went on to have 2 children. Then, in 2009, she legally married Ahmed Noure Sahed Elmi in a civil ceremony. DNA testing from Somali sources suggests that Elmi is actually her biological brother. She married her brother, most likely to help him gain immigration status. She then divorced Elmi in 2017 and legally married Hersi again in 2018. Trump's face registered pure disgust. She married her own brother. We can't definitively prove that without DNA testing here, which she'd certainly refuse. Noam admitted this limitation, but the evidence is incredibly strong. They share the same family name, the same tribal affiliation, and multiple sources claim they are siblings. And the timing of the marriage lined up perfectly with his need for immigration status. Then, once he had his papers, she divorced him. It's a classic case of immigration fraud. NSA Director Mitchell then added another layer to the story. "We've also been monitoring her communications, operating under a visa warrant. She's in regular contact with Somali government officials and individuals linked to the Muslim Brotherhood. From a counterintelligence standpoint, so some of these contacts are quite concerning." Mitchell displayed the intercepts. "We have calls where she discusses U.S. policy toward Somalia with Somali government ministers, seemingly coordinating positions, and even refers to Somalia as we and America as they." While nothing is explicitly illegal, the overall pattern suggests her main loyalty lies with Somalia and Islamic political movements, not with the United States. Trump took it all in. 6 months of investigation revealed terrorism financing, immigration fraud, fraudulent marriages, and foreign communications hinting at divided loyalty. It was truly overwhelming. White House counsel Blanche then laid out the legal strategy. We have 3 possible paths forward. First, there's criminal prosecution for terrorism financing and immigration fraud. However, that would take years, require convincing a D.C. jury, and she'd be free to continue her fight. Second, pushing for congressional expulsion needs a 2/3 vote in the House. It's unlikely we'd get that many Democrats to vote for it, even with all this evidence. Third, denaturalization. Explain that, Trump requested. Trump said, if citizenship was obtained through fraud or by lying about important facts, it can be taken away. Blanche went on to explain. It's covered under Immigration and Nationality Act, Section 340. We'd file a civil denaturalization complaint in federal court. Then, we'd present evidence that she lied on her applications about her name, her family, and her background. If the judge agrees that the fraud was crucial to her getting citizenship, it can be stripped away. How long would that take? It could take up to 2 years if she fights us every step of the way, Blanche admitted. But here's the plan. We offer her a choice. She can resign from Congress and leave the country voluntarily within 72 hours. She can tell any story she likes. Maybe health reasons, family matters, or even going back to help out. Somalia. We won't press any charges. We won't pursue denaturalization either. Everything will stay quiet. And if she refuses, then we go nuclear. We'll hold a press conference announcing the investigation. We'll declassify enough information to show the public she's a terrorism financier and guilty of immigration fraud. We'll file denaturalization proceedings against her. She'll fight it, but she'll ultimately lose. And the evidence against her is simply too strong. And while she's fighting, she'll be considered toxic. No Democrat will dare defend her. She'll lose in court. Her citizenship will be stripped away. She'll become a deportable alien. ICE will take her into custody and deport her straight to Somalia. Trump slowly began to smile. I like that plan. She gets to choose, but either way, she's gone for good. WS then added the political calculation. If she leaves quietly, we avoid a huge media circus. No accusations of targeting Muslims or immigrants would surface. She'll simply fade away. No kota fan kang, moi chuyen sitro than mot, kao chuyen lon, nhung chung toi, jako ju bang chung, je chong lung, du sao jinwa, jo on ka. Trump jan juara, quiet jin kua min. Sap ksep kuak, hop vao, luk ba gio chieu. Jang cho ko tabiet la vevietsgi. Hoije ko tabuok vao voi suing hise, giang giai cho toive Palestine, hai batku giogi. Hoije ko ta kamtai thoai mai. Sao jo toi sichoko tamot luachon. Va toi muon hin thaive matkota hin han ramin jan song joy. Luk hai gioba moi phut, joan se qua Omar jan jen hatrang. Ko ai jan bao cho kach phuong tien truyen thong than tien rang, ko ai se gap tong thong. CNN ko mot fong, vien tuk truk ben nguai. Mes NB si jan trong, tu de san sang cho mot kuok fong, van truk tiep ko de dien ra sao jo. Omar buok kwa hu vukan nin voi kai jao ngang kao, san sang joy jao, san sang jung len chong lai ke batnat. Yog ko ai jan den toy gian di chuyen bang se jatap luyen loy le kuamin, kach ko ai sevak transufan biet chung tok, su kem koi, hong ijin jok tai kwa ong ta. Ko ai jo hotong kwa kan te, dok han klang jen fong bao dok. Kan kwa mora, Vajola luk moy chuyen tronen toete. Kon fong kong juok sap ksep cho mot kwok hop bin thuong. Kong kon han vien gi chep. Kong kon hipan gia, chi ko Trump ngoi, sao ban lam viek trong rat thoai mai. Giam jok FBI ray jung kung tap ho so. On botruong an nin noi gianum voi chong tai liu. Matvu jung gach okach kwaravao. Ko jiu gi jo hong on, nhung Omar van kien jin voi ke hoach kwa min. Ko ai tu choi chiets ge juok moi, jung truok ban lam viek, babat jau kwok tan kong jan chuan bisan. Tuan gay tong tong, va toi dung dan sung jo mot kach rat long leo. Toi kong biet gay jang choi tro quien luk nho be nao. Ko ai tuan ra moi loi lang ma jan chuan bi. Moi loi kong kich ko ai jan tap duot, goi ong ta la gia nua, lam kam. Fan biet chung tok. Fat sit, hak jen kas kao trang, su sui giam tin than. Hung ijin jok tai kwa ong ta. Moi thu ko ai jan noi tren Twitter. Hung bai gyo la noi thang vao mat ong ta. Trump chien goi jo, je ko ai trut gian. Hong nat loi, chimim ko ai nen hu de jang thuong tuk man trin dien. Ki ko ai ket thuk, to hon hen, kam tai kwaen luk, ong ta chi hoi jon gian, song chua. Ko ai lai bat jau, tem hung loi lang ma. Ngoik shuang, yong ong talan lung vadut koat katngang, urvalan jau tien. Omar kam tai so hai tuk subi Trump kong, fanung theo kach ko ai mong joy. Wajio jo ko ngia, la chuyen nai kong fain hu ko ai jan du tin. Toi baong goik suong, Trump hach lai. Boy vin hangi toi sap cho ko tai sete joy toan bo kuok joy ko. Tu ko ai ngoik suong, su tu tin dan kan kiet. Kong hi ko ojai je noi ve Palestine chu, Trump noi ke. Toi kong quantam jen hong dong, tweet kua ko. Ko ojai vi ko la moi, je doa an nin kwok gia. Itvatoi jang chokomot ko, hoi jeroi, jitrong im lang truo kitoi hui, hoai ko kong kai. Ong tajai tapo, so kwa ban. Giam jok rei, chokotak sem hungi chung tako. Vada gioi kwa Omar, bat jau sup jo. Giam jots FBI rai buak toi, motap ho sukwa min motkach chuyen hip. Ong ai jan trin bai bang chung trong hang tram kwak hop bao, trong suot sun hip kwa min. Nhung ke kong bo, gian jiep, toi faham. Jai chi lamot truong hop kats. Iviet joy, tuong jang ngoi joy, dien ong trong fong, bao duk kong he, thai joy bang chung. Ang hi si Omar, ong bat jau, giong noi trung lap va chuyen hiep. Trong sao thang kwa, FB ijan tien han mot kwok jiu, tra chong hung bo lien kwan jen, kats gyao dish tai chin gyua kova an hung kan han juok, chi jin lan hung ke ung ho kong bo, hoi je toi chi cho kon hung gi, chung toi jan tim tay. Ong ai rutra kats, hoso tai chin, jat chung len ban noi ko ai ko de te, su kat bang sao kien gan hang voi kats gyao dich juok jan dao, kat shaks han chuyen koan nang gan hang. Moi kai jao juoch gi lai kan then. Bat jao tu thang mot nam hai nang hin kong, tram hai moi hai. Ko jan bet jao thuk hien, kats koan chuyen koan nang gan hang thuong, suyen chomot kan han, o Mogadishu, Somalia, Ahmed Nursai, Anhrekuako. Kach koan chuyen koan luon juok, kau truch doi moin hin juola jetran, kach yau kau bao, kau gyao dich tiente. Ban hin juola o jai, namang hin juola o jo, bon hin juola. Trong hon ba nam. A moi bai koan shuyen koan rieng biet voi tong so tien la bai moi tam hin jola. Omar ko gang noi, nhong rei van tiep tukmot kach troi che. Viet gui tien cho kia jen, o nuok nguai kong, fai labat hop fap. Hiun guain hap kulam jiu jo, nhong chung toi jan jiu traksem tien jang jijao. Ahmed Nursei, jiu han mod doan ngiep, ten la Tawakal Express. Jo la mot mang luoi chu yen tien hawala. Ong ai cho koksem nhong bukan giam sat, Motmatien kwa hang o Mogadishu. Ngoy dan sep hang ben Nguay. Utwakal tu gyoy thiulamo, dichvu chuyentian, hapfapcho. Kongjong nangoy Somalia, he nangoy. Nhung wao thang moy motnam, he nanghin kongtram, he moy ba, van fong kiem swat. Taisan nuok nangoy, kwa bo taichin. Huakai jati jen, Tawakal Express. Lamot thuk, the Thai, tro hung bo vi chung toy jan tuthap, bang chung rang no jang juok sudung je chuyen tiancho al-Shabaab. Mat Omar jan tain hot. An ay hong hibiet Ahmed nur seinam trong, dan sach theo doi hong bo kuaf be. Ray noi, chosem tai liu mat. Chung toy ko kat ban ngelen, lien lak kwa an ay voikat chihui al-Shabaab jambiet. Chung toy ko loy khai kwa ngoy kong kap tong tin, va vai tro kwa an ay trong mang, loy tai chin kwa to chok. Chung toy ko camera giam sat chotay an ay gap gon hung ke kung bo juok chi jin. Ong ay jan vach ralo trin tien bak. Chung toy jan theo doi kach koan chuyen hoan kwa, ko kwa kach tai koan kwa tawakal. By moi tamenghin jo lama ko gui ja kong o lai voi Ahmed. Dano ja juoch chuyen ji. We've traced at least $34,000 going into bank accounts belonging to individuals on terrorism watch lists, al-Shabaab facilitators, weapons purchasers, and people actively engaged in terrorism against the Somali government and African Union forces. He pulled out photos of some of these individuals. Men in tactical gear, men with weapons. These are some of the people who received money that originated from your wire transfers. This man, Abdullahi Hassan, is a known al-Shabaab commander in the lower Shabelle region. He received $8,000 that we traced back through the network to your transfer from March 2023. This man, Mohammed Abdi, is an explosives expert. He received $6,000 that came from your August 2023 transfer. Omar looked like she might be sick. I was sending money to family. I had no idea what Ahmed was doing with it. You're a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ray said flatly. Do you receive regular classified briefings on al-Shabaab and terrorism financing networks in East Africa? You've been specifically briefed on Hawala networks being used for terrorism financing. You knew, or you should have known, exactly what you were doing. He showed more evidence. We also have phone records. You spoke with Ahmed 17 times over that same 3-year period, always just before or just after a wire transfer. On 4 of those calls, you discussed the political situation in Somalia and security conditions, information that could be useful to al-Shabaab in planning operations. I was just asking about family, Omar protested weakly. On a call from March 2023, you told Ahmed that U.S. military support for African Union forces was being reduced. That information was classified at the time. You had learned it in a Foreign Affairs Committee briefing just 2 days earlier. You passed it to someone on a terrorism watch list. Ray closed that section of his folder. The legal standard for material support to terrorism is providing any support, including financial, to designated terrorists, regardless of whether you specifically intended to support terrorism. You sent $78,000 that ended up in the hands of terrorists. That's a federal crime that carries up to 20 years in prison. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem stepped forward next. She was a former governor, not a career law enforcement official, but she had spent months reviewing immigration files, and her anger at what she'd found was barely contained. "Congresswoman," she began, her voice tight, "your entire presence in the United States is based on fraud. Your refugee application, your asylum claims, your citizenship application, all of it was built on lies." She opened the immigration files, documents yellowed with age, applications from the 1990s. And your official biography says you came to the United States in 1992 as a refugee fleeing the Somali Civil War. You were 8 years old. You say your mother died in Somalia when you were young. You say your father brought you and your siblings to America to escape the violence. You've told this story hundreds of times. It's your origin story. The refugee who became a congresswoman. Noam pulled out a document. This is a British passport record for Fatima Aden, issued in 1991. Your mother, who, according to you, died in Somalia in the 1980s. Omar's eyes went wide. That's not. Your mother is alive, Congresswoman. She's been living in London since 1991. We have 32 years of records, passport renewals, utility bills, National Health Service records, and we have records of you visiting her. Noam showed entry and exit records. You visited London in 2015, 2016, 2017, 2019, 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024. 8 visits, and each time, surveillance cameras at Heathrow captured you. CN phone location data shows you spending time at your mother's residence in East London. She laid out photos, airport security camera images showing Omar, phone location data plotted on maps of London. You've been visiting your supposedly dead mother for years while publicly claiming she died when you were a child. That's fraud. Lying about a deceased parent in your refugee narrative. I never said she died, Omar tried. I said I grew up without her. Noam cut her off by pulling up quotes. My interview with CNN, 2019. I lost my mother when I was very young in Somalia. Interview with Time magazine, 2020. My mother died during the Civil War. Speech at a refugee advocacy event, 2021. As someone who lost her mother to the violence in Somalia, you've said it repeatedly, and it's a lie. She moved to the next issue. But that's just one lie. The bigger fraud is your name. Your refugee application was filed under the Omar family. But you weren't born an Omar. You were born Ilhan Noor. She showed birth records. This is a birth certificate from Somalia, 1982. Ilhan Noor, daughter of Noor Sahed Ibrahim, not an Omar. You used a different family's name to qualify for refugee status under family reunification provisions. That's identity fraud. Birth records from Somalia during a civil war are unreliable. Omar's voice was shaking. Now we have corroborating evidence. Noam then revealed, we have school records from Kenya's Dadaab refugee camp, which list you as Ilhan Noor. Plus, there's testimony from people who knew your family back in Somalia, identifying you by that same name, and most damning of all, your marriage records. She pulled out a stack of marriage certificates. In 2002, you married Ahmed Hirsi in an Islamic ceremony and had 2 children with him, she explained. Then, in 2009, you married Ahmed Noor Said Elme in a legal civil ceremony right here in Minnesota. Notice the last name? It's the same as your birth name. And we have evidence suggesting Elme is actually your biological brother. You married your own brother to commit immigration fraud, specifically to help him get legal status. That's a lie, Omar insisted, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. Then take a DNA test, Noam challenged. Right now, we'll compare your DNA to Ahmed Elme's, she continued. If you're not related, this theory is completely destroyed. But if you are siblings, you've committed marriage fraud. Omar remained silent. You divorced Elme in 2017, Noam pointed out. She continued, right after he obtained citizenship, You legally married Hersey again in 2018. This is a classic pattern for immigration fraud. You marry a family member to get them their papers. You divorce them once they have legal status. Then you go back to your real spouse. She stacked all the documents neatly. A fake identity on a refugee application. Lying about your mother being dead. A fraudulent marriage to your own brother. Every single piece of your immigration history appears to be fraudulent. That means your citizenship was obtained illegally. And illegal citizenship can, indeed, be revoked. Next, NSA Director General Sarah Mitchell stepped up to present the communications intelligence. As a career signals intelligence officer, she had spent 3 decades intercepting enemy communications. Presenting intercepts of an American congresswoman felt surreal, she admitted, but the evidence was undeniable. We've been monitoring your communications under a FISA warrant since June 2025, Mitchell stated directly. The warrant was approved because there was probable cause that you were engaged in activities threatening national security. And what we found only confirms those suspicions. She then displayed detailed call logs. Over a period of 6 months, you made 43 phone calls to Somali government officials. These weren't casual calls. They were strategic. You spoke with the Somali foreign minister 7 times, the defense minister 3 times, members of parliament 12 times, and various other officials. I'm allowed to speak with foreign governments, Omar countered. It's part of my congressional oversight. The content of those calls raises significant concerns, Mitchell interrupted. She proceeded to play an audio clip. Omar's voice was heard speaking in Somali, with English subtitles appearing on a screen. Then Omar, the Americans are reducing their support for Amy Sam. This creates an opportunity for the government to negotiate directly with clan elders in the South, without U.S. interference. Somali official, when will the reduction begin? Omar, the briefing said March, but the administration doesn't want it public just yet. Mitchell stopped the audio playback. That, she emphasized, taint was you discussing classified U.S. military planning with a foreign government, information you received in a classified Foreign Affairs Committee briefing. You disclosed it to Somalia before it was even public. She then played yet another clip. Omar, I'm working with my colleagues to block the aid package to Kenya. If we can cut their funding, they'll pull troops from AMISOM and Somalia will have more autonomy. Mitchell stopped it once more. Here, and you're discussing your efforts to undermine a U.S. ally's military operation, not because it's bad for America, but because you want Somalia to have more autonomy. Another clip began. Omar, we are working on this together. I represent the Somali people in Congress. Their interests are my interests. Mitchell then looked directly at Omar. Congresswoman, you don't represent the Somali people. You represent Minnesota's 5th District. You are a U.S. Congresswoman, not a Somali government representative. Yet, in these calls, you consistently refer to Somalia as we and America as they. She presented even more intercepts. You've also been in contact with individuals linked to the Muslim Brotherhood. There were 3 calls with Muhammad Badi, an Egyptian national living in Qatar with known ties to the Brotherhood. We also have multiple encrypted messages with organizations designated as Brotherhood fronts. This pattern strongly suggests your political loyalty lies with Islamic political movements, not with the United States. This is Islamophobic profiling, Omar cried out desperately. You're targeting me because I'm Muslim. We're investigating you because you send money to terrorists and pass classified information to foreign governments, Mitchell stated coldly. Your religion is irrelevant. Your actions are what matter here. Finally, the White House counsel. Todd Blanche stepped forward to outline the legal framework. He had previously served as a federal prosecutor before moving to private practice, and then to the White House. He was known for his ability to explain complex legal procedures in simple terms. Congresswoman Omar, he began, let me explain the legal situation you're facing under Section 340 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Citizenship obtained through fraud or material misrepresentation can be revoked. The standard here is civil, not criminal, meaning we just need a preponderance of evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt. He then presented the relevant statute. We'll file a denaturalization complaint directly in federal district court. We'll show proof that you lied on your applications concerning your name, your family, and your background. This is all the evidence Secretary Noem just laid out for you. Now, if the judge decides your fraud was key to getting citizenship, then your naturalization gets revoked. I'll fight it in court, Omar declared, trying to sound brave, but his fear was evident. You'll lose, Blanche stated, quite frankly. We possess solid documentation proving your fraud. Things like birth certificates showing a completely different name. And your mother, who is clearly alive, even though you claimed she was dead. Plus, marriage records point to fraud, and phone records track you visiting her in London. Honestly, the evidence is overwhelming. He then brought out some previous court cases. For instance, there's the 2017 case of Maslining Jack versus United States. That was a Supreme Court ruling specifically about denaturalization. The court decided that any significant fraud in immigration cases is enough reason for revocation. Then there's United States versus OD from 2015. Their citizenship was revoked because of immigration fraud, and the defendant fought it for 2 long years, but ultimately she lost and was deported. Once your citizenship is gone, he went on, you become an alien subject to deportation. Immigration and Customs Enforcement will then take you into custody. You'll be held while your deportation process moves forward. Thanks to Somalia's cooperation, you'd be sent back there in about 90 days. Omar's hands were visibly trembling. You can't just deport a member of Congress. You won't be a member of Congress much longer, Blanche retorted. As soon as these accusations go public, you'll either have to resign or face expulsion. The House isn't about to keep someone who's facing denaturalization for terrorism financing and immigration fraud. You'll be gone within a week, easily. He then laid out the timeline for Omar. Here's exactly how things will unfold if you decide to fight us. Tomorrow, the President will hold a press conference, announce the investigation, and declassify enough evidence to expose you as a terrorism financier and an immigration fraud. The media will absolutely erupt. Your fellow Democratic colleagues will immediately distance themselves from you. They simply can't defend terrorism financing. Within just 48 hours, the House will vote on your expulsion. A 2/3 majority is what's needed. With all this evidence public, you'll be lucky to get 30 votes supporting you. You'll be expelled. Then, we file the denaturalization complaint. You'll try to fight it. That will take anywhere from 18 months to 2 years. You'll lose. The evidence is just too strong. Your citizenship will be revoked. ICE will arrest you. You'll be detained at an immigration facility. You could try to fight deportation, but you'll have no legal standing. Somalia, for you, is perfectly safe. You'll then be publicly deported with every single camera in the world watching. Blanche then closed his folder. That's what we call the hard way. Trump had been listening quietly, letting his team present all the evidence. Now, he leaned forward, clearly taking back charge of the meeting. "So, here's the situation," he began, his voice now calm and almost friendly. "We've got you dead to rights on terrorism financing. Specifically, $78,000 sent to Al-Shabaab. That alone is 20 years in prison. Wait, we also have you on immigration fraud, which means your citizenship is stripped and you're deported. And we have you for disclosing classified information. That's even more prison time right there." He spread his hands wide. "You sure fought back pretty hard when you first walked in here. You called me senile. You said I couldn't even put a sentence together. And you called me weak and pathetic. That was a big mistake on your part. Not because now I'm really not feeling generous." Omar remained frozen in his seat. All of his earlier arrogance had completely vanished. "But I'm a deal maker," Trump continued, undeterred, "and I'm still going to offer you a deal anyway. Not because I like you, I don't, but because I'd rather not spend the next 2 years dealing with this whole circus. So, here's my offer. It's a one-time deal. Take it or leave it." He started counting on his fingers. "You resign from Congress today. That means effective immediately. You'll hold a press conference tomorrow. You'll announce your resignation, citing health reasons, family issues, or a desire to focus more on helping Somalia. Whatever story you choose, you officially renounce your U.S. citizenship. You then leave the country within 72 hours. You can go to Somalia or London to stay with your very much alive mother, or anywhere else that will have you. And you never, ever come back. Do all that, and we won't prosecute you. We won't pursue denaturalization either. We won't hold that press conference exposing absolutely everything. Everything stays quiet. You get to control your own story. You just fade away quietly. Maybe you even end up in Somali politics, which seems to be where you wanted to be all along." He then leaned back in his chair. "Or you can simply tell me to go to hell. You walk out of here believing you can actually fight all this. And tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., I'll be standing in the Rose Garden with Director Ray, Secretary Noom, and every single piece of this evidence. We'll make it all public, every single piece of it. The terrorism financing, the immigration fraud, your mother being alive, the brother marriage, absolutely all of it. The media will absolutely go insane. Your colleagues will abandon you instantly. You'll be expelled from Congress within a week. We'll file for denaturalization, and you'll fight it from a detention facility for 2 long years. You'll lose, and you'll get deported anyway. But instead of leaving quietly, you'll be leaving in handcuffs on a deportation flight with cameras rolling. The whole world will watch Ilhan Omar, the great progressive champion, get deported for immigration fraud and terrorism financing." Trump's voice then softened. "Easy way or hard way, your choice. But either way, you're leaving. And the only question is whether you control how it happens, or I do." He glanced down at his watch. "It's 3:45 right now. You have until noon on Friday. That's 72 hours. If you resign by noon on Friday and book a flight out of the country, we'll never speak of this again. If you don't, I'm calling that press conference." "So, what's it going to be?" Omar's voice came out in a whisper. "This is unconstitutional. You can't force a member of Congress. I'm not forcing anything." Trump said, "So I'm giving you a choice. Leave quietly or leave in disgrace. But you're leaving because you committed fraud to get here, and you've been funding terrorists ever since you got here. You don't belong in Congress. You don't belong in this country." He stood up then, signaling the meeting was over. 72 hours. Director Ray will give you his card. Once you've decided, call him. If I don't hear from you by Friday at noon, turn on Fox News at 10 a.m. You'll see yourself getting destroyed in real time. Omar stood, her legs feeling shaky. I need some time to consult with lawyers. Consult with whoever you want, Trump said. But understand, if this goes public, no lawyer can save you. The evidence is just too strong. You'll end up in Somalia either way. This way, you get to leave with some dignity. That way, you leave in handcuffs. He then gestured toward the door. 72 hours. Don't waste them. Omar left the Oval Office in a daze, and the Secret Service agents then escorted her out through the West Wing. She'd arrived 90 minutes earlier, ready to lecture the president. Now, she was leaving, facing deportation. The reporters she'd alerted were waiting outside. CNN, MSNBC. She walked past them without a word, ignoring their shouted questions, got in her car, drove back to the Capitol in silence. Her mind was racing. This couldn't possibly be real. This just had to be a bluff, some kind of intimidation tactic. But the evidence, the photos, the recordings, her own voice on NSA intercepts, the immigration documents, it was all real. She spent that evening with lawyers, not her usual progressive activist attorneys, but criminal defense lawyers, immigration lawyers, people who dealt with serious federal charges. They reviewed what she'd told them about the evidence, and every single one of them gave her the exact same advice. Just take the deal. Leave quietly. Fighting would only make it worse. If even half of what they showed you is real, one lawyer said, you simply can't fight this. Terrorism financing is a strict liability crime. It doesn't matter if you intended to support terrorism. You sent money to someone who was on the watch list. It then went to terrorists. You're guilty. That's 20 years. The immigration fraud, another lawyer added, that's grounds for denaturalization. If you lied on your applications, used a fake name, your citizenship can be revoked. We could fight it, but with the evidence you described, we'd lose. And you can't stay in Congress through this. A third lawyer said, the moment it becomes public, the pressure for expulsion will be overwhelming. Democrats just won't defend you. They simply can't. Terrorism financing? Immigration fraud? You'd be toxic. But Omar just couldn't accept it. Couldn't accept that Trump had beaten her. To blow over that Trump was bluffing. That blow over that Trump was bluffing. That he wouldn't actually go public with this. On Thursday, she started to panic, called more lawyers, and all gave her the same advice. Just take the deal. Leave quietly. Fighting would only make it worse. Thursday night, she drafted a resignation letter. She stared at it for hours, yet couldn't bring herself to sign it. Friday morning at 9 a.m., her phone rang. FB Director Ray. Congresswoman, it's 9 a.m. You have 3 hours. The president is prepared to hold that press conference at noon if he doesn't hear from me that you've resigned. I need your answer. I need more time, Omar said. You've had 72 hours. So, what's your decision? Silence on the line. Then, I'm not resigning. This is unconstitutional. I'm going to fight it. Understood, Ray said. The press conference will begin at noon. I'd advise you not to make any statements until you see what evidence we're releasing. It'll be worse than you think. He hung up. At 11:45 a.m., the White House announced an urgent presidential press conference in the Rose Garden at noon. The topic: a national security matter involving a member of Congress. The media went insane with speculation. Which member? What did they do? By noon, Every network had cut to live coverage. Trump walked out to the Rose Garden podium at 12:02 p.m. Behind him, FBI Director Wray, DHS Secretary Noem, Attorney General Pam Bondi, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. For seasoned Washington reporters, the sight of that group immediately signaled serious business. Trump kicked things off without any introduction. "I'm here," he stated, "here to announce that the FBI has wrapped up a 6-month counterterrorism investigation into Minnesota's Representative Ilhan Omar. The investigation revealed that Representative Omar had sent $78,000 to individuals identified as terrorism supporters. This money, they found, went directly to funding al-Shabaab's terrorist activities in Somalia." The press corps immediately erupted, yelling questions. Trump, however, simply ignored them, and the investigation also uncovered that Representative Omar had gotten her U.S. citizenship fraudulently. She'd lied about who she was, lied about her family, and even engaged in marriage fraud to help a relative get immigration status. With this evidence, the Department of Homeland Security was starting denaturalization proceedings against her. More chaos erupted among the reporters. "Director Wray," Trump announced, "will now present some of the declassified evidence for this briefing." Wray, a binder in hand, stepped up to the podium and began detailing the case. Wire transfers to Ahmed Noor, the designation of Tawakal Express as a terrorism financing group, the clear money trail to al-Shabaab, and even photos of terrorists who received the funds. Then Noem took over, presenting the immigration fraud, including a birth certificate with a different name, passport records proving her mother was alive, and marriage documents hinting at fraud. See, they revealed just enough to present a public case without giving away classified sources and methods, but the impact was devastating. News networks split their screens, showing the Rose Garden press conference on one side and Omar's congressional office on the other, where reporters were gathering en masse. Omar's office quickly released a statement. "This is a politically motivated attack," it read, "on a Muslim woman who dares to speak truth to power." President Trump is weaponizing law enforcement to target his political opponents. This is fascism. Yet, the evidence presented was simply too powerful. Even progressive media struggled to fully defend her. While Trump might have had political motivations, the bank records themselves were undeniably real. The terrorism watch list designations were also genuine, and the immigration documents were equally authentic. Within just a few hours, a Democratic leadership began issuing very careful statements. Speaker Hakeem Jeffries, for instance, stated, "These are serious allegations that demand a full investigation. If true, they would represent conduct completely unbecoming of a member of Congress." By Friday evening, even fellow Democrats were calling for her resignation. Not the squad, mind you. They remained completely silent. But moderate Democrats from swing districts simply couldn't afford to defend alleged terrorism financing. Saturday morning, the House Ethics Committee announced it was launching an emergency investigation. By Saturday afternoon, articles of expulsion had already been drafted. On Sunday, Omar appeared on MSNBC, insisting she was innocent, claiming the evidence was fabricated and that this was political persecution. But she looked scared and defensive, a stark contrast to the confident firebrand who'd been in the Oval Office just 3 days prior. Monday saw the denaturalization complaint filed in federal court in D.C., officially titled United States versus Ilhan Omar. The complaint meticulously detailed all the alleged fraud. It included exhibits like the birth certificate, the marriage records, and her immigration applications riddled with lies. Omar's lawyers quickly filed an emergency motion to dismiss, and arguing the entire proceedings were politically motivated. The judge, an Obama appointee, swiftly denied the motion. Political motivation, he stated, doesn't invalidate proceedings if the evidence of fraud is legitimate. We'll evaluate the evidence based on its own merits. On Tuesday, the House held a vote on her expulsion. The final tally was 289 to 143. 86 Democrats had joined all the Republicans. Ilhan Omar was officially expelled from Congress. She became only the sixth member ever expelled in U.S. history, and the very first for immigration fraud and terrorism financing. On Wednesday, ICE filed a detainer. This meant that once her citizenship was revoked, she'd be taken into custody, awaiting deportation. Omar fought the denaturalization battle for 18 long months. Her lawyers tried every possible argument. They cited political persecution, unreliable foreign documents, and even technical defects in the proceedings. To none of it worked. The evidence against her was simply too overwhelming. The judge ultimately found, by a preponderance of the evidence, that she had indeed lied on her immigration applications, used a false name, lied about her mother, and committed marriage fraud. In August 2026, the judge delivered his ruling. Citizenship revoked. The very next day, ICE officers arrested her at her Minneapolis home. She was then detained at an immigration facility, awaiting deportation. She filed appeals. No, but they were all denied. Somalia confirmed they would accept her as a deportee. In November 2026, Ilhan Omar was escorted onto a deportation flight bound for Mogadishu. Cameras captured the scene. Her in handcuffs, being led onto the plane by ICE officers. She looked nothing like the confident congresswoman who'd publicly insulted the president less than 2 years prior. The flight took off, and America's most prominent progressive congresswoman was gone. Ilhan Omar arrived in Mogadishu in November 2026. It was the very country she'd claimed to flee years earlier as a refugee. This was the country she had funneled money to while living in America. The very same country she called "we" in those intercepted phone calls. But now, Somalia didn't want her. The government made it crystal clear. She wasn't welcome in their politics, and she wasn't welcome in public life. She was an embarrassment. When this was the woman deported from America for fraud and financing terrorism. She tried to rebuild her life, starting a small NGO and attempting to use her name recognition. But without her American citizenship, her congressional platform, or the media that once adored her, she was simply irrelevant. Her own mother in London refused to see her. She even told reporters how ashamed she was of what her daughter had done. Her children remained in America with her ex-husband, Ahmed Hersi, who divorced her and won custody as soon as the fraud was exposed. They changed their last name, wanting nothing more to do with her. 2 years after being deported, a Reuters reporter found her living in a small apartment in Mogadishu, just working as an interpreter. She had no political role, zero influence, just another person trying to get by in a tough country. The reporter asked her a simple question. "Do you have any regrets?" Omar replied, "I regret going to that meeting. I regret not taking the deal. I regret fighting. I should have just left quietly." But when asked, "Do you regret the terrorism financing, the immigration fraud?" she refused to answer that question. Back in America, her deportation served as a political lesson, a stark warning. It said you can immigrate to America. You can even become a citizen. You can get elected to Congress. But what you can't do is commit fraud to get here. You can't fund terrorists. And you can't maintain loyalty to a foreign government. Because eventually, the evidence will catch up with you. Trump himself talked about it at a rally in Ohio back in 2027. He said, "I gave her a choice. The easy way or the hard way? Leave quietly with a little dignity, or get exposed and deported in front of the whole world. She chose the hard way. Bad choice. A very bad choice. She thought she could insult me. Thought she could threaten me. She thought her friends in the media would protect her. They didn't, because we had the evidence. Real evidence. And evidence doesn't care about your feelings or your Twitter followers. The crowd just roared. "She's in Somalia now," he continued. "Her probably wishes she'd taken my deal. But she thought she was tough. Thought she could fight the President of the United States. She found out differently. Some people just have to learn the hard way." The Ilhan Omar case set a new precedent. Immigration enforcement was immediately strengthened. Proceedings for denaturalization in fraud cases were streamlined. Members of Congress began to face enhanced vetting for any foreign contacts. And every progressive who had defended her, who called it political persecution, who insisted the evidence was fake, had to face the fact that it was all true. The terrorism financing, the immigration fraud, all of it. She had committed the crimes. She had been caught, and she had been deported. It wasn't because she was a Muslim, and not because she was a progressive, but because she broke the law. Years later, her story was being taught in law schools, in immigration classes covering denaturalization, and in national security classes on terrorism financing, and in political science classes about congressional ethics. The woman who once stood in the Oval Office insulting the president, thinking she was untouchable, had learned the hardest lesson of all. Nobody is above the law, not even a member of Congress. Trump had given her 72 hours to just leave quietly. She refused, so he publicly destroyed her and had her deported anyway. She thought she was the one with the power. She was wrong, and the evidence had the power. The law had the power. The president had the power. And Ilhan Omar would spend the rest of her life in Mogadishu, regretting that one day she walked into the Oval Office thinking she could bully Donald Trump. He simply smiled, let her rant, and then showed her the very evidence that would end her career, strip her of her citizenship, and send her back to Somalia. The easy way or the hard way?